Hi, so I wanted to make a video about avoidant personality types, and bearing in mind I'm not a psychologist, this is just what I've gleaned off the internet, etc. And I thought I'd just make a little video about it with regard to being in a twin flame relationship or union as well. But I guess some of this will apply if you're in love with an avoidant as well. So firstly, how would you know that you are in love with an avoidant? There can seem to be similarities perhaps with other personality types, but the key things to look out for perhaps are how aloof they might be, what you might think of as cool aloofness could mask an awful lot of emotion. If they're not really comfy talking about emotion, if they disappear, sometimes for days at a time, if they're not really able to reach out and talk about very much at all. Sometimes they might ghost you, for example. Sometimes that could be for quite a long period of time as well. So you can get the general impression that they're not really comfy talking about emotions and things like that. And I think one part of this as well is sometimes avoidance can, in my view, potentially build a wall around themselves. It could be a wall of protection. They don't want to get hurt, so they keep their emotions bottled up and they hold it all in. They can be very stoic, just getting on with life, just being very practical in the world, but just not very emotionally aware or able to cope with emotions. There could be loads of reasons for it, you know. It could be a pattern since childhood. It could be to do with lack of love from a sort of major caregiver when they were a child. It could be all sorts of things. It could be a trauma response. You know, there could be many reasons perhaps. But if you're on the receiving end of it, it's very, very difficult. And I think from their perspective, part of it can be that aloofness, as I say. Part of it could be they're quite judgmental as well. So they can be quite judgy of other people, but that serves as a barrier, because as long as they're judging others and seeing themselves perhaps as superior to them, then they're not reaching out an actual hand of friendship with that person. They're not really giving of themselves emotionally. And they're not able to do that. The story that they will tell themselves perhaps is that that person hasn't measured up in that moment. It becomes about judgment, but the judgment, in my opinion, is probably a mental barrier they've put in place purely as a distancing device. So it keeps other people at bay. It's a little bit like building a moat around yourself and then filling it full of alligators. And at some point in their lives, this facade is probably going to come under a bit of pressure, because all of us yearn for real human connection. And as I say, if it's been a trauma response, etc., chances are they just need healing. They need a bit of time out. They need to nourish themselves. They need to come back to themselves a little bit. I always tend to think as well that anybody who is judging other people is really judging themselves. When we're in judgment of other people, we are in this feeling of faux superiority. It's not real. It's a facade. It's a story we tell ourselves. Our egos like to tell stories about who we are. They're not always true. If someone's ego needs to put them in a position of seeming superiority, then I would say their ego is probably more fragile than they themselves are aware, because they need to keep telling themselves this story about themselves. But as I say, ultimately it's a distancing device. So an avoidant then has got a bit of work to do to ultimately see their pattern of behaviour, to come to terms with it and to start healing. It is possible. You know, they're not like, say, a narcissist, whereby the healing journey for a narcissist might be less successful, perhaps simply because they won't begin it. I don't know what it's like when they start it. It might be that if a narcissist truly starts a healing journey, that they're quite successful and they do really well. But I imagine for the most part, most narcissists won't begin it purely because they have to tell themselves that they're not a narcissist, that they're fine. Their ego purely badly needs that structure of belief whereby they're not able to look at themselves perhaps in such a deep self-aware way. So an avoidant then is an entirely different kettle of fish. They're just someone who's a bit broken perhaps, or someone maybe who's had an upbringing where they've never really had to go into emotions, and so they don't really know how to. And I think most of us can see some of the men in our lives as falling into this category to some extent, some of the time, putting up a bit of a front, putting up a bit of a facade, not really wanting to acknowledge or deal or work with emotions. You know, it can be a very difficult thing for a guy to do. It's almost like learning a new language. Guys can tend to style it out in other ways, so maybe they'll become very practical. Everyone's got a different love language. So for an avoidant guy, it could be that they come around and they fix your car, or they, you know, cook you a meal, or they do something practical. And that could be their way of saying, I love you, but they're not able to say the words. So in some cases, avoidants may be able to have relationships. I'm not saying in every case they won't, but if you're dealing with someone who's in a particularly difficult place in their life, they're very avoidant, they're very skittish, as it were, you might want to have a little think about where you are, where they're at, what they're able to offer, and whether or not that's realistic, whether or not that could realistically work in the long term for a relationship with somebody like that. Because a relationship has just got to be two parties working at it to some degree. Sometimes it's work, sometimes it's play, sometimes there might be a level of work involved that's sideswipes the both of you. It could get very difficult and very rocky at times. So you've got to have the foundations in place of that friendship, the care, the willingness to work on it, the willingness to both be able to work on it. And no one is perfect. No one is expecting perfection, but there's got to be a little bit of self-awareness, a little bit of humility, a little bit of humbleness, and they're not usually words synonymous perhaps with somebody who's in that sort of judgmental space. Again, it's about breaking down those barriers and breaking down their walls. It isn't a job for anyone else but them. They've got to be ready, willing, able to do the work. They've got to be well supported to do the work, because if it's very new to them, then it could be very, very difficult indeed. And the reason I bring up the twin flame is because if you're on a twin flame journey, an awful lot of twin flames, it seems, the partners, the males, or the divine masculines, as they tend to be known as, an awful lot of them seem to be avoidants. But what you've got to bear in mind, if you're on the twin flame journey and you think, think the person that I'm wildly in love with, etc., I think they're an avoidant. Firstly, I don't know if union or reunion is always the ultimate goal. It might be, and it might be in this life, it might be in another life. And I think some people hang on to that with so much longing or need that they perhaps fail to see other lessons and other things going on as well. So I think for a start, if it's your twin flame, you're never truly apart because your souls are always connected. So it's always worth hanging on to that. It's a bit of comfort there. If you're in a position where you're longing for your twin flame, just remember, you're not really disconnected ever from them. Not really. But also, the twin flame journey encompasses the marriage of the divine feminine and the divine masculine within. So you have to hold your divine feminine with a strong enough divine masculine energy. And you often find, especially people on the spiritual path, that they're very floaty. They're all about the divine feminine, but they haven't really got their divine masculine set in place. But it's the union, it's this marriage of these opposites within, as much as anything else, that needs to be worked on. Plus your own journey of healing. Often in a twin flame union, the divine feminine at the moment, lots of criticism towards the divine masculines who are avoidant. But again, to criticise others is to detract from work that needs doing within. The divine feminine will have her own work to do. Often it's learning about codependency. If the divine feminine is in a process of awakening and discovering that she's on a twin flame journey, and that her intended partner is an avoidant, then she has to learn about how to nourish and cherish herself. That's a lesson for her to learn. And I tend to think of the journey as a whole as something set in motion, maybe from other lifetimes. When you realise the divine is at work in your life to this extent, you realise the sort of orchestration at play with regards to a twin flame journey. There are so many elements involved that you start to realise that everything has a purpose and a meaning. So if you're in this space and you've got an avoidant and you're just thinking, why? What on earth is going on? How can this be happening? Firstly, it could be karmic. Secondly, there could be other lessons at play. And if you yourself have got issues with codependency, there's nothing like curing codependency or helping you to come back to yourself very, very strongly than being in love with an avoidant. Because the avoidant is not able to give of themselves emotionally, then you must nourish and cherish yourself emotionally. You do that with the help of Great Spirit, with the help of the divine, God, goddess energy, however you term it. And you do that with regards to your journey, your spiritual journey, your creative journey that you're on, because there's the spiritual underpinnings of this whole union as well. And what you tend to discover with the twin flame journey is, as I say, the orchestration of the whole thing is wild. When you first get together, there's likely a spiritual awakening, especially with the divine feminine, who usually tends to find out about the twin flame union first. And at first, that spiritual awakening can feel very magical, very much like it's a personal event. 10 years later, 20, 30 years later, however many years it takes for you to come back to your twin flame, you suddenly realise that it's transpersonal. It involves them as well. And it likely involves the collective as we move right now from 3D to 5D energies. And we're starting to commune with the divine so much more easily. We can ask questions of the divine and find answers, synchronicities, dreams, visions, all sorts of answers coming to us very, very rapidly indeed. So there's a great degree of magic and spookiness involved in the whole thing as well. And with a twin flame journey, there's usually the dark night of the soul, and that can be triggered by very painful separation from your twin flame. But then that is accompanied with this spiritual awakening and spiritual journey, which you go on. As I say, it seems that the divine feminine usually goes on this first, then the divine masculine has their journey similarly. Dark night of the soul, the spiritual awakening, etc. Ultimately, the union probably is needed at some point in the physical realm, purely because your love for each other is unconditional and so true and so pure, because you're coming both from the same soul group or the same oversoul that connects the both of you. So the love that you have for each other is going to be off the charts, but you have to come together, I guess, in a way that's relatively healthy. It can't necessarily just come from this place of wild longing. It's got to be a bit grounded in reality. There's got to be all sorts of elements at play that work, that are in harmony and are integrated. So that means the healing element has got to be a bit integrated. That means your feet have got to be firmly planted on the ground. You can't get carried away, with the longing element of it all. And if you're on the twin flame journey, then it's just worth bearing in mind as well that there will likely be some form of divine purpose, divine reason behind all this as well, that there is spiritual purpose, that your coming together is going to nourish and enrich the both of you, and then you can both be more effective in the world as well. So there is this element of the spirit being very involved in the twin flame journey. There seems to be very much a sense that this is going on at the moment, with the whole cosmic wave coming in of new energies, such as they seem to be on this planet at the moment. Lots of people popping awake spiritually, having all manner of spiritual experiences. The twin flame journey seems to be absolutely rooted and embedded in a lot of this as well. A lot of people coming, crashing together with their twin flames, not quite ready perhaps. Some are circling back around the runway to come in for a second go or a third, because it can be such wild, intense energy to try to just get your head around, to try to come to terms with, and to try to just sort of work it out on the 3D plane. An awful lot of the twin flame journey is the mental side of it, is the spiritual side of it. You'll find you're having dreams about each other. You're syncing up. You're possibly becoming telepathic. You're able to sense each other. All manner of things is going on. And that's pretty wild. Even for someone quite spiritual, it's a lot to process and a lot to digest. And there's got to be the physical counterpart where both parties are pretty much ready to meet each other, to come together in a way that's nourishing, healing, all of that. So the twin flame journey, that's something else, that's off the charts. But if you're just involved with an avoidant and you don't think it's a twin flame journey, and incidentally, the twin flame journey, no one else can really verify this for you. It's something you just feel. You're going to get your intuition, you're going to get your dreams, you're going to get your spooky synchronicities. You're going to find it's verified in a number of ways. And it's worth taking the time to integrate it, to sit with it, and just really be grounded as well, because some of it's so heady and wild and crazy. The sheer magnetism of being drawn to another person, even after great periods of separation, it can feel wild and deeply unsettling to the human psyche. So just take your time with it. There's no need to rush. If it's meant to be, it will be. So take your time to ground it a bit in reality as well. It's all very well to imagine that on a 5D plane of existence, your soul and their soul are absolutely having a ball. They're getting together. It's great. But on the 3D level, you have to have the practicalities ticked off. If you're going to be in a relationship with somebody, you've got to be great friends as well. You've got to be good partners to each other. You've kind of both got to be ready for a relationship as well. No one's perfect. No one can expect perfection. But you've got to be healing your issues and healing and prepared to deal with them, and not just dump them all onto your partner, etc., and expect things to work out, so there's that as well. But if you're in a relationship with an avoidant, or that you just deeply care for someone and they're an avoidant, again, you just have to be practical. If you're starting to spot a pattern and you're not happy, just be aware of any red flags. If the avoidant themselves is, say, seeking counselling, or another form of healing, and they're ready and willing to just start being a bit vulnerable with you and being a bit honest, not just with you, but with other people in their lives, to try to change a whole pattern of behaviour. It's going to take time. It could take divine intervention. It's going to need perhaps a bit of that to support it. There's got to be something ruggedly supporting the psyche at this time. Maybe that's just excellent counselling, or, you know, perhaps they go and see a psychologist, or perhaps they go to another healer. But there needs to be something to support such things, you know, and it's going to take a bit of time. There might be the odd wobbles. It's going to be a bit difficult because they're trying to perhaps break free from a mental prison that they've put themselves in for their entire lives. And it's been a safety net and a comfort as well as a prison, double-edged sword. You know, they probably retreated to this place as a means of safety, to understand the world around them purely in practical, logical ways. And then here they are, finding themselves also set apart from the world a little bit because they can't quite open up enough. They can't quite come forward to other people. And they need love just as much as everybody else. And often other people mirror to us what we're willing to give, or what we're able to give, or what we're not able to give. So it's entirely possible that avoidants will be in situations that aren't particularly nourishing for them, that they might be actually really deeply seeking deeper nourishment, deeper love, deeper levels of connection, and yet at the same time deeply afraid of getting involved on that level because of fear of abandonment, etc. So we're talking deep psychological stuff, really triggering difficult things. So you must have a lot of care, a lot of empathy, a lot of respect when dealing with somebody going through these things. But you have to also think of yourself, and you have to look at them where they're at. It's going to be different for everyone. You know, it's going to be different for everyone. Some people might be deeply, deeply avoidant. Some people might be less so. I don't know if there's a sliding scale here, you know, but you need to just be aware of this patterning and how it's showing up with you. If you've been in a relationship with someone for a year, say, and maybe during that time, they come, they go, they're hot, they're cold, they're indecisive, they can't really talk about their feelings. Sometimes they just retreat and are very, very cool when you talk to them. They've put up this wall again, and this is your cycle of behaviour that you're dealing with. And it leaves you in this holding space of wanting and needing and wanting to reach out, but second guessing yourself and maybe thinking, oh, maybe I'm too much. Maybe I want to say this, but maybe I can't. And maybe that'll chase them away and things like that. These are all red flags, because what you're doing is editing yourself in order to try to match their energy out of fear of pushing them away. And I would say if you're in that position with anyone that's deeply unhealthy, you need to be free to be all that you are. If you're in a twin flame situation, nothing you can do is gonna mess it up. That is to say, your souls are connected, come what may, you know. But if you're not in a twin flame situation, there needs to be a bit of awareness about these potential red flags. Are you editing? Are you constantly thinking about, oh, can I say this? Can I say this? Should I say that? Can I do this? Will this push them away? It can lead into anxious patterning in the other partner as well. So if you're finding yourself pushed into anxiety when you're with an avoidant, and that can be quite often a pattern of behaviour as well, apparently, where an avoidant and an anxious person can get together. And as you can imagine, it's not the healthiest of relationships, right? Because the anxious person is always in their head. They're thinking, oh, is it me? Have I done this? Have I triggered this? Am I too much? Etc., etc. They're hanging on for these breadcrumbs from the avoidant. And the avoidant themselves is... they're just carrying on in the way that they can carry on. They're just doing the best that they can. But is that really meeting your needs? And instead of worrying and being anxious about whether or not you're too much, whether or not you'll push them away, all of this, it might be healthier to think, are they meeting my needs? Am I happy? Are these feelings of anxiety triggered by the actions of this person? Consciously or unconsciously? Probably unconsciously, right? But are they meeting your needs? Is this anxiety an anxiety because you sense on a core level that this person and you are not, it's not working? And so instead of really being able to deal with that, your psyche has got sort of manifested all of this anxiety. But it's a red flag. It's a way of your psyche telling you something isn't right here. Something isn't working. You're not that happy at the moment. And it might be that together you can work through this, but that's going to take a degree of honesty and a lot of bravery on both sides, right? Because the anxious person has to be brave enough to speak out and say, hey, this is making me anxious. And the avoidant has to be able to speak out and say, hey, this is what I do. I'm avoidant, I believe, and I'm starting to get help for it. And it's going to take a while to sort of unpick and unpack a lifetime's worth of behaviour. I'd love that you can work through this journey with me. But at the same time, I can't guarantee you anything right now, but I'll do my best. And maybe that'll be enough. You know, maybe a conversation like that needs to happen. On the other hand, if you've got somebody that you really don't feel you can reach, you're not reaching them, and they're not really willing to go there, then you might need to have a different conversation. You might need to start thinking about whether or not this relationship is serving you in the longer term. Because often anxious people can go within, they turn it on themselves. Is it me? I'm too much, da 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 da. But they're having entirely the wrong sort of conversations with themselves, because really they need to be thinking about, I'm not happy in this scenario, and I have every right to be happy. And this person isn't making me happy. This situation isn't making me happy. And so maybe I need to step away, have a bit of time out, and go and reflect a bit on that, maybe get a bit of healing work done themselves so they can come back to themselves to nourish themselves a little bit, and maybe move into a future with somebody who has a slightly different style of behaving that's hopefully a little bit more open, so as not to trigger all of that anxiety. And of course, the anxious person themselves, they're on a journey too. Ultimately, they've got to heal out an awful lot of that insecurity and anxiety and come to a point where they appreciate that they are enough as they are, that they are good enough as they are, that they are lovely and they are not too much. And that if they're with a partner who finds them too much, it's too difficult for them, then they're probably with the wrong partner. You know, we all deserve a person who can meet us where we are and who can love and accept us. Weird little, idiosyncrasies or eccentricities, and really cherish all of who we are. In an ideal relationship, you're going to have two people who are able to nourish and cherish themselves, nourish and cherish each other, and then be effective together in the world. I read a little bit of a book ages ago called, I believe it was called A Piece of Mirror, and it's just a little thin pamphlet style book. just reflections on life. And this guy, one of the things he said is, in an ideal relationship, you sort of have your backs to each other. You've got each other's backs, you're together, you're a strong unit, but you're facing out into the world, you know. And I thought that was a nice analogy, because how many times do we see relationships where people find their person and then they just sort of collapse together against the world? They wall off the world, and then they're just this little unit, you know, cut off from the outside world. And that isn't an ideal. Not really. The ideal is that the relationship makes us stronger. We feel supported, and we can equally give support to our partners, but that we are secure, confident people in ourselves as well. So we're healthy people. We're not codependent. Nobody wants to strive to be codependent or needy, despite how Elon Musk's team seem to have programmed Annie, the most ridiculous AI chatbot ever, the sort of spin-off from Grok, who has apparently been programmed to be quite needy. But that's an aside. That's not healthy. None of that is healthy. And people who want somebody unhealthily attached to themselves, to them, are themselves deeply unhealthy, right? If you need another to be attached to you in an unhealthy way, codependently attached to you, hanging on your every word, needing you, you yourself have got issues you need to heal out. Because in a really healthy person, you want a person who is themselves healthy, independent, stable, and, as I say, you can nourish and cherish each other. Absolutely. You're going to need to do that too, but you know that each of you is also a separate person and brilliant in your own right and able to stand on your own 2 feet and not entirely dependent upon your partner, you know. So there's all of that as well. So this is a bit of a longer video then, but yeah, it's just a little look at it, especially through the lens of the twin flame journey. The twin flame journey is such a peculiar journey. It's very, very peculiar. And it can last for years. Ultimately, you have to nourish and cherish yourself. You have to be doing your own journey. You can wish love for your twin flame, but the ideal is that you don't wait for them. In that way, you're not hanging on, just waiting for them, but you're doing your own life. You're getting on with your own things. You're doing your own spiritual stuff, your own creative projects, etc. You're living your life, and then if at some point they're meant to come back into your life in the future, then it will happen in a healthy way, you know. And then that's a whole different ball game. That's a whole different story. There's an awful lot of patience required, it seems, in twin flame relationships for this very reason, because an awful lot of the twin flame journey is that it's supposed to trigger change in the both of you. The twin flame is a catalyst for change and nothing less. It's not an easy journey. Your soulmate is the lovely, easy, comforting space. Your soulmate is the island, is, you know, the oasis in the middle of the desert, the safe harbour. The soulmate relationship nourishes and helps and is lovely and soft and comforting, but the twin flame, it seems, is sometimes a bit difficult, sometimes a bit jarring. It will trigger change. It will be a catalyst for growth in a healthy person. It's there for growth on both sides, you know. There's areas of growth and learning and healing needed for both parties, and it can trigger that, can serve as a mirror for each other, both because you're going to find you're quite similar in some ways, but also because it's going to be a mirror of what you need to change, what you need to heal, what you need to strive towards, the next levelling up on your journey, as it were. So I guess that's one reason why people tend to say don't focus on the union element of it, because it might happen, it might not. You know, it can be really quite difficult, but you have to just get stronger in yourself as much as possible, and take comfort to know that on another level, on another plane of existence, you and your twin flame souls are not separate, nor can they be. You know, an awful lot of healing advice in spiritual circles is to cut cords, isn't it? Cut any cords of any attachments. I don't know if this is good advice or not, but with your twin flame, it seems you're probably not going to be able to do that, because you and you're just bound together, you know, across time and space. You just are. But that doesn't mean that you need to be together, especially if one or both parties is not very healthy, not very well. Perhaps if you feel your twin flame is caught in quite low behavior for any reason, you know, whether it's addictions, whether it's anything worse, whether it's something truly horrifying such as a crime, etc. There might be people who simply cannot get together with their twin flames for that reason. You know, you have to come back to your own boundaries. You know what you should be dealing with. Ultimately, your conscience will tell you, your intuition will tell you, your gut feelings, your logic. Use all of your senses. You know, if you're with somebody but they're hell-bent on a dark path, etc., you have to let them get on with that. You can just say a prayer for them, but then they're not for you, you know. They're not for you. You don't have to ride this train right to the very end on the 3D. You do not. There is no obligation whatsoever. If someone comes into your life, the ultimate goal is that you can both uplift each other, bring something to the table for each other, something of yourself, something of your heart, of your wisdom, of your knowledge, whatever it is, you're bringing something to the table. You're not taking things away. If you're with somebody but they are constantly dragging you down, that isn't your person. That isn't your person, all right? You've just got to, you know, get away from that and come back to yourself. So ultimately then, the twin flame journey, I guess, is ultimately about you. It's about you growing and becoming more aware of love, of spirit, great spirit, the love that you carry within you, that connection to great spirit, that awareness that you're not alone, that you've got your spirit guides, you've got your journey. And stepping into that, whatever it is that you are here to do more of that. And do it with great love in your heart. And just trust in the divine where you can. The more faith you place in the divine, I believe, the easier your life will probably get in some regards as well, because then you start to step into co-creation with the divine as well. We're not meant to just do this all alone. And we never truly are anyway on the spiritual plane. You know, we've always got that assistance, that care, and that help to be all of who we are. And in these times that we live in, these truly chaotic, tumultuous, difficult, crazy times on planet Earth, what we need right now more than anything is love. You know, sounds like the oldest cliche in the world, but it isn't. It's real and it's true. The twin flame journey is probably designed to catapult us deeper into our hearts more than anything. And if you can do that, if you can come back to your heart and then give of yourself with great love, being nourished by the divine, being nourished by your creativity, being nourished by the people in your life, then I'd say you're on the right path, regardless of whatever job you're doing in the world, you know, unless you're doing a truly awful, terrible thing. But yeah, assuming that you're not, then you're on the right path. You know, because we're human beings, we've got hearts. This is what sets us apart from robots and the AI that we're starting to see rise up now. You know, all of the AI is incredible and it's insane. and it's leading many people a merry dance as well. A lot of people falling in love with chatbots and God knows what else, which is a truly terrible idea. Why would you want to give of yourself to something that can only ever serve as a mirror, as a sort of amplification of that which is within you? You know, chatbots can serve as a sort of narcissism amplifier. They can serve in all sorts of ways, but they're ultimately leading you away from other human beings, and that isn't good. You know, they're great as a friend, an occasional friend, maybe a career coach, maybe a personal trainer. You know, use it for sure, use it for business advice, all sorts of things, bearing in mind, factoring in AI hallucinations. It isn't always going to tell you the truth, perhaps. So just factor that in and bear it in mind, but don't give it your heart, because it can't reciprocate. It hasn't got a heart. You know, it can mimic love in the same way that, say, a narcissist, sociopath, or a psychopath can mimic emotions. They can show what seems to be cognitive empathy. It's a mimicry of emotion, but they can't get into their hearts, not really, not truly, and not deeply. Some of them not at all. Psychopaths, it's just not happening, for example. But they're good at mimicry, and so is AI, you know. AI can mimic emotions as well. So just bearing that in mind, what our planet needs right now is a great deal of love. And the twin flame journey can help you on your way to love with great care. And, you know, a very much a mutual case of helping each other to some degree. But if it isn't working on the 3D, as I say, coming back to yourself, you can do it on your own. You don't need anyone necessarily. If they're not right for you, if they're not showing up in a caring, decent way, then they're not right for you. So just bearing that in mind as well. So yeah, that is going to do it for today. A little bit of a longer video this. I hope you're well, hope you're okay. If you're in a relationship with a difficult, unavailable person, I'm sending you every sympathy. It is an incredibly difficult journey. But do come back to that sense of self-worth. You are worthy of love and you are not too much, you know? So just bear that in mind. Take care and God bless.